Today, the small city of Springfield, Ohio, found itself at the center.
All eyes are on Springfield, Ohio, as millions of dollars
are eating
are now
pets in Springfield, Ohio, not going
Meanwhile,
away.
people in Springfield, Ohio, remain on edge.
Springfield, where a recent influx of Haitian migrants in Clark County.
Package for Springfield as the city deals with this surge of migrants from Haiti. And we're hearing
now, one student is dead, more than 20 others are hurt, and an entire community is in shock.
Listen, hang on.
You're out of order. Please.
Warren.
Just be quiet, okay?
What is America? What is a nation? Is it a government? A group of people? An idea? This is the story of Springfield, Ohio, and of an immigration system that would change it forever. As the influx of Haitian migrants in Springfield was pushed to the forefront of the 2024 election cycle, an onslaught of conflicting claims about the situation emerged. So what is the true story? How did 20,000 Haitians arrive in a city of 60,000 people within just a few years? And who is responsible?
When Clark County was created in 1818, Springfield became the county seat. The seat of government for Springfield itself is the city building, where mayor, board of commissioners, and city manager guide the destinies of the community. The meetings are open to the public, so that any interested resident can watch as his city government functions.
Throughout most of the 20th century, Springfield, the county seat of Clark County, Ohio, located between the major urban centers of Dayton and Columbus, thrived as a booming manufacturing town, providing a high quality of life and strong community for its working-class families. But the rise of free trade in the 80s and 90s brought about the mass exodus of manufacturing jobs from Springfield, as businesses relocated to other countries where labor was cheaper. Between 1970 and 2010, the city lost a quarter of its population, suffered the largest decrease in median income of any metropolitan area in the United States, and in 2011 was named by Gallup as the unhappiest city in the country. A hollowed-out shell of its former self, Springfield saw a dramatic rise in crime and violence since the 80s, quickly earning its place among the most dangerous cities in Ohio, while also being victimized by the opioid crisis causing devastation across America. With the community in ruins, was Springfield destined to be abandoned forever? In its global war on terror, beginning in the early 2000s, the U.S. military began to increasingly rely on unmanned aircraft systems and unmanned aerial vehicles, commonly known as drones, for many military operations. Due to the location of the Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Dayton and the Air National Guard Base in Springfield, the 14-county Dayton region was largely based around defense and aerospace manufacturing, and was ideally located to become strategically important in the emerging unmanned aircraft system industry. The new focus on drones would also attract attention from certain foreign entities. In 2010, the Dayton Region Israel Trade Alliance was formed to facilitate relationships between Israeli defense companies and businesses in the Dayton region. Over the following decade, the economies of Israel and the Dayton region would become increasingly intertwined, primarily around aerospace, including Israeli companies embedding themselves in the National UAS Training and Certification Center of Dayton's Sinclair Community College. And in 2020, Springfield manufacturer Tool Tech secured a $230,000 contract with Israeli defense manufacturer Ashot Ashkelon. Beginning in 2011, Dayton Region economic development officials would work with the Economic Development Administration of the U.S. Department of Commerce to create a comprehensive economic development strategy, a plan in which local and federal officials reach agreement on certain policy goals in order to secure more federal funding for local economic development, with cities and regions across America competing for the EDA funds. The 2012 Dayton Region Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy, approved by the EDA, would reflect a focus on development of the emerging aerospace technologies, including advancing the use of the Springfield Air National Guard Base for UAS activity and job creation, and securing an enduring relationship with the Department of Defense, with the goals of making Ohio and the Dayton region the destination of choice for the unmanned aircraft systems industry, and increasing the Dayton region's market share of defense contracting awards. But if the U.S. government was going to fund the rebuilding of the Dayton region for the manufacturing of the weapons and technologies needed in the Zionist Middle Eastern wars of America and Israel, Dayton and Springfield would have to prove themselves willing to submit to other federal policy goals as well.
My name is David Lubell, and I'm the founder and executive director of Welcoming America. Welcoming America is an organization that's working to change the way immigrant integration is done in this country, but at the same time we're trying to work to unlock the full potentials of communities. Currently, the dynamic is...
David Lubell. In 2009, Lubell founded Welcoming America, a nonprofit organization which aims to increase immigrant inclusion in local communities across the United States. Local governments can join the Welcoming Network by committing themselves to the Welcoming Standard, a comprehensive set of policies aimed at attracting and facilitating immigration.
There's now over 100 cities in the United States that are part of the organization that I founded, Welcoming America, that are part of the Welcoming America Network. And we're getting closer every day to a welcoming tipping point, to a time when every single city in the United States either is welcoming or is surrounded by cities that are welcoming, and will realize that if they don't get on the bus, they miss the bus, and they're going to become welcoming too.
Rather than relying on humanitarian appeals, Welcoming America urges its activists to stick to economy-focused arguments, selling immigration to local governments and businesses as a means of counteracting population decline and providing a cheap immigrant labor force, beneficial to the bottom line of employers.
First, there's the demographic cliff. In the industrialized world, the birth rates are going down, the aging population is going up, and soon there's not going to be enough working-age people to keep economic output where it is today.
What motivates David Lubell and Welcoming America in pushing for the demographic transformation of America through immigration? In an article for the Jewish Daily Forward, Lubell explains that his work in immigration would not have happened without his Jewish roots and upbringing, stating, "It's all a part of the Jewish values I was raised with. Welcoming strangers is such an innate part of our value system as a culture. This is not just about refugees and immigrants. This is about all of us and our values as Jewish Americans." Lubell is not alone in making this connection. In 2017, Lubell was the recipient of the $100,000 Charles Bronfman Prize, which is given annually to young humanitarians whose work is grounded in their Jewish values.
Welcoming is what being Jewish is all about. The scapegoating of foreigners,
which is paralleled by the growth of anti-Semitism, must be recognized and confronted. For as Jews, we know intimately where systematic othering can lead if left unchecked.
But Germany really is a model of a country that's saying, you know, we want to make this work, we want to figure out how to make this work, but it's not easy. And so I personally am drawn to that as a Jewish American. I'm drawn to this idea of being able to help a country that had such a challenging and, you know, a past that had such an impact on my ancestors, but that want to be a model for something good. I want to help them to do that, and I want to help them be models for other countries in Europe, just like Tennessee or Nashville is a model for Charlotte and Atlanta. It's going to spread, I believe, through Europe, and we're doing this work.
In other words, Jewish organizations carrying out the demographic replacement of white majorities in nations across the world is the Jewish way of paying Europe back for Jewish suffering during World War II.
I think there's a resurgence of anti-Semitism because at this point in time, Europe has not yet learned how to be multicultural. And I think we're going to be part of the throes of that transformation, which must take place. Europe is not going to be the monolithic societies that they once were in the last century. Jews are going to be at the center of that. It's a huge transformation for Europe to make. They are now going into a multicultural mode, and Jews will be resented because of our leading role. But without that leading role and without that transformation, Europe will not survive.
Welcoming America is just one of many Jewish organizations facilitating mass immigration into the United States, including New American Economy, founded in 2010 by Jewish billionaire Michael Bloomberg, Forward.us, a powerful immigration lobby founded by Jewish billionaire Mark Zuckerberg, and HIAS, the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society, whose activities include partnering with the U.S. State Department to distribute refugees and immigrants to sites throughout the country. In 2017, the Anti-Defamation League, a Jewish organization, would present HIAS with its inaugural Nation of Immigrants Award. During his acceptance speech, HIAS President and CEO Mark Hetfield had this to say.
HIAS used to welcome refugees because they were Jewish. Today, we welcome refugees because we are Jewish.
In an article for Forward, Hetfield would recall first meeting David Lubell of Welcoming America during Passover in 2011 at a White House session on immigration reform. At the meeting, Lubell had stood up and issued a demand to President Obama to bypass congressional authority and use executive power to shield illegal immigrants from deportation. Within weeks, the Obama administration had reversed course and committed itself to a policy of keeping as many illegal immigrants in the U.S. as possible, regardless of immigration law.
And Congress is living in the past, and cities are living in the future.
Over the following years, Welcoming America would partner with the White House and play a leading role in the immigration policies of the Obama administration. Between 2011 and 2016, Welcoming America received over $1 million in funding from the federal government, supplementing the almost $10 million it received from predominantly Jewish donors such as the Einhorn Family Trust and the Open Society Foundation of Jewish billionaire George Soros.
So let me close with the story of somebody who's working to bring people together. David Lubell, who many of you know and who's here today. Where's David? Where is he? There is he. And today, David's initiative is expanding across the country. I think you said, David, that we've got these kinds of efforts going on in 42 cities around the country. This is what makes America exceptional.
In 2014, the Obama administration would establish the White House Task Force on New Americans, a partnership of 18 federal agencies, including the Departments of Commerce, Homeland Security, and Housing and Urban Development, designed to develop a coordinated federal policy on immigrant integration, following the lead of Welcoming America in a Building Welcoming Communities campaign, and guiding local governments like Dayton, Ohio, to base their community planning around a policy of immigrant economic development. Welcoming America's Guide to Immigrant Economic Development, written by Jewish politician and immigration policymaker Steve Tobekman, explains that by following a policy of immigrant-focused economic development, local officials can incorporate immigrant labor pools into their economic development planning, making their region more competitive by attracting corporations with global talent needs. In other words, a need for cheap foreign labor. The guide stresses the importance of recruiting business leaders and chambers of commerce to immigrant-focused economic development by appealing to their economic self-interest, noting that business benefits when such organizations take the lead in growing diverse talent pools that regions need to remain competitive in the 21st century. Among the programs suggested for local governments and chambers of commerce to take an immigrant-focused approach is directly connecting working-class immigrants to jobs through staffing companies and workforce development agencies, directly providing a cheap immigrant labor pool to businesses and bypassing the American worker altogether, and the use of government entities known as land banks to acquire abandoned and run-down properties before transferring them to immigrants at discounted rates not offered to native-born Americans, allowing some immigrants to become landlords themselves, renting to other migrants from their home country. Named as a model city for this immigrant-focused approach is Dayton, Ohio, under its Welcome Dayton Plan, recognized by the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation as a model program for accelerating economic growth. Welcome Dayton was founded in 2011, and by the end of that year had secured the unanimous adoption of the Welcome Dayton Plan by the City of Dayton Commission, joining Dayton to the Welcoming Network and committing it to the Welcoming Standard and the policy of immigrant-focused economic development. Welcoming communities must also ensure that local government officials not say anything negative about immigration or immigrant inclusion, and must celebrate immigrant cultures, customs, and beliefs. That the local housing authority must prioritize housing immigrants over Americans, and that local law enforcement must ignore the immigration status of criminals and avoid the deportation of immigrants whenever possible. The City of Dayton would follow the welcoming standard so thoroughly that in 2017, Dayton was named by Welcoming America as its first ever certified welcoming city. Through its Welcome Dayton initiative, Dayton is also a member of Welcoming America's Welcoming Economies Global Network, designed to target Rust Belt communities with declining populations and rates of foreign-born below the national average. A 2012 document from the Welcoming Economies Global Network, titled Diverse by Design, makes explicit the racial program of Welcoming America, identifying the main problem of the Southwest Ohio region as being too white. While the demographics of our country are rapidly changing, it's clear that our region's diversity is not comparable to the country as a whole. We believe that regions that reflect the new demographics will be better prepared to grow and prosper. It is widely known that the demographics of the U.S. are changing, and that after the 2040 census, non-Hispanic whites will no longer constitute the majority of the population. This major shift is already changing the workplace and the marketplace, raising the question of whether regions lacking diversity can maintain a strong economy and attract talent. Compared to our peer regions, Cincinnati's population is highly homogeneous, with only 18% of the population identifying with a demographic other than non-Hispanic white. The demographic decline of the white population has long been used as a talking point by advocates of mass non-white immigration, such as Jewish Senator Chuck Schumer.
Now more than ever, we're short of workers. We have a population that is not reproducing it on its own with the same level that it used to. The only way we're going to have a great future in America is if we welcome and embrace immigrants, the dreamers, and all of them, because our ultimate goal is to help the dreamers, but get a path to citizenship for all 11 million or however many undocumented there are here.
But what had caused the decline of the white population to begin with? And why not implement policies to encourage higher birth rates among America's white population, instead of abandoning them and replacing them with foreigners? Well, because that would be National Socialism. After the defeat of Nazi Germany in World War II, the victorious powers would place the blame for the catastrophic war on national pride, and through bodies such as the United Nations would declare nationalism and authoritarianism to be mass mental illnesses passed down by the family unit. Illnesses that would have to be eradicated in order for sovereign nations to be replaced by a global system. In 1950, the American Jewish Committee released The Authoritarian Personality, a pseudo-scientific study which identified the psychological imprint of the white family as the source of traits such as authoritarianism, ethnocentrism, and anti-Semitism, arbitrarily declared threats to humanity by the Jewish researchers. If white families were a threat to Jewish power, they would just have to be done away with. As the pressures of population growth came to be viewed as a cause of nationalism, and therefore a threat to humanity, population control became official government policy in white Western nations, as advocated by Jewish Planned Parenthood leader Alan Guttmacher.
And what we are attempting to do, of course, is to encourage countries to curtail the rate of growth. I am encouraged because we have governments becoming deeply involved each year. One or more, or many governments make population control part of national policy.
Thus began the age of sexual revolution and contraception, feminism and abortion, all working together to send the white birth rate plummeting. While government agencies such as the National Institute of Mental Health, under Jewish director Stanley Yoles and his Jewish underling E. James Lieberman, began to aggressively advocate for America's 90% white population to have smaller families. In the 1960s, Jewish activist Noel Ignatieff would play a central role in leading the New Left in an open war against white people, and by the early 2000s would openly call for an anti-white movement and the abolition of the white race. Any attempt to treat whites as a legitimate group with valid interests runs counter to the goal of transcending race. What is needed is a band of people who are determined to challenge, disrupt, and eventually break up the institutions that reproduce whiteness. Nothing offers so great a possibility of transforming the political climate of this country as an anti-white movement. The goal of abolishing the white race is on its face so desirable that some may find it hard to believe that it could incur any opposition other than from committed white supremacists. Make no mistake about it, we intend to keep bashing the dead white males and the live ones, and the females too, until the social construct known as the white race is destroyed. Not deconstructed, but destroyed.
My concern is doing away with whiteness. Whiteness is a form of racial oppression. Treason to whiteness is loyalty to humanity. The task is to bring this minority together in such a way that it makes it impossible for the legacy of whiteness to continue to reproduce itself.
Over the following 2 decades, the Jewish anti-white movement would gain such mainstream institutional power that the U.S. government, presiding over a population of around 200 million white people, could openly announce its policy of white genocide. In February of 2015, the Obama White House held a summit on countering violent extremism, hosted by Vice President Joe Biden. Seated next to Biden was Jewish Deputy Secretary of Homeland Security, Alejandro Mayorkas, a top immigration official in the Obama White House who would later oversee the largest wave of non-white immigration in U.S. history as the Secretary of Homeland Security in the Biden administration. During his speech, Vice President Biden laid out what can only be interpreted as the official demographic policy of the U.S. government.
I'm proud of the American record on culture and economic integration of not only our Muslim communities, but African communities, Asian communities, Hispanic communities, and the wave still continues. It's not going to stop, nor should we want it to stop. An unrelenting stream of immigration, non-stop. Folks like me who were Caucasian of European descent, for the first time in 2017, will be in an absolute minority in the United States of America. Absolute minority. Fewer than 50% of the people in America, from then and on, will be white European stock. That's not a bad thing. That's a source of our strength.
In 2011, Dayton, Ohio had committed itself to the federal policy of white demographic replacement through its Welcome Dayton initiative as part of a larger economic strategy to secure increased federal funding and a closer partnership with the federal government. Now, it was Springfield's turn. In early 2013, Cedarville University, a Baptist university located 12 miles south of Springfield, would force the resignation of its vice president for student life, Carl Ruby, citing Ruby's liberal activism being in conflict with the conservative character of the university. Ruby's resignation would allow him to dedicate himself fully to pro-immigration causes, joining the National Immigration Forum, a Washington, D.C.-based immigration lobby, and the Evangelical Immigration Table, which argues that Scripture requires all Christians to support and facilitate mass immigration.
As an American Christian, is it your job, your duty? Are you called to keep people who are different than you out of the United States? Or are you called to get them into the kingdom of God?
Leviticus 19 is one place that God commands the Israelites over and over again. You were foreigners, you were slaves in Egypt. Therefore, welcome the stranger among you. Welcome the alien in your midst. So we as Christians, if we believe the Bible, if we take God at what He says, if we want to obey His commands, then we need to welcome the stranger.
After his resignation from Cedarville, Ruby would also become the senior pastor at Central Christian Church in Springfield and would use his position to partner with Welcoming America, preaching the gospel of immigrant-focused economic development to Springfield's government and business leaders. In February of 2014, Carl Ruby would launch Welcome Springfield, which would aim to offset population decline in Clark County through Latino immigration, including by welcoming illegal immigrants. With Ruby stating, "Our goal is to bring money into Clark County and to aggressively go after grants that will help us to serve this population and to revitalize and rebuild the economy."
When we talk about economic development, one of the areas is moving people from being renters to homeowners. A lot of undocumented people are sitting on lots of cash that they are afraid to invest. You're not going to invest in a home or a business if you think you might be deported. Also, I think Springfield and the Dayton area can provide a model for the rest of the country. And I would love to see this region, Springfield and Dayton, kind of establish itself as being among the most progressive regions in the country that are seeking to invite immigrants to join us and to contribute to the economy.
In June of that year, the Welcoming Economies Global Network, then operating under the name Global Great Lakes, would hold its annual convening for 2014. Among the featured speakers was Carl Ruby, showcasing Welcome Springfield and other immigration projects, and meeting with Jewish leaders in immigrant economic development, such as David Lubell and Steve Tobuckman, to chart the future of immigration efforts across the Rust Belt. The next month, Welcome Springfield would see its first major success. In July of 2014, the City Commission of Springfield would unanimously approve the Welcome Springfield Resolution and launch the Welcome Springfield Initiative, joining Springfield to the Welcoming America Network and committing the city to the policy of immigrant-focused economic development. Carl Ruby would celebrate the victory, stating that it sends a message to immigrants and businesses who employ immigrants. When it comes to a business deciding whether or not they're going to expand, the fact that there's community support for their workforce, I think is going to be very helpful. Springfield had joined the Welcoming Network in 2014. Just as immigrant economic development was becoming official federal policy, with major federal funders of local development projects, such as the Departments of Commerce and Housing and Urban Development, being brought under the leadership of Welcoming America in its Building Welcoming Communities campaign. So began a new era of increased federal funding and economic activity in Springfield. In May of 2014, Clark County would form a land bank, which would soon receive millions in federal funding through the state of Ohio in order to acquire, demolish, and resell vacant properties which had been abandoned for decades, clearing the way for new development. While the city of Springfield would tap into a constant stream of funding from federal agencies, such as the Department of Housing and Urban Development, leading to the first new homes being built in Springfield since the 80s. The city would also attract businesses and developers into Springfield by offering 100% property tax abatements for 15 to 30 years, and employment incentive agreements by which 30 to 50% of income tax paid by employees of new businesses would be returned directly to their employers. With the city's immigrant-focused policies, businesses would not have to offer competitive wages and benefits to attract American workers back to the region, and could instead be promised a cheap immigrant labor force delivered to their doorstep. In 2016, the Springfield Chamber of Commerce would secure the expansion to Springfield of Japanese auto manufacturer Topri America, soon to be a major employer of Springfield's new arrivals. While new economic activity was surging, the Latino population explosion that city planners had taken for granted wasn't happening on its own. If Springfield was to be a model city for immigrant-focused economic development, the local government and Chamber of Commerce would have to take direct action to provide corporations with a cheap immigrant labor force. But where would the immigrants come from? In 1804, a 13-year-long slave revolt against French colonial rule on the Caribbean island of Saint-Domingue ended with the establishment of a black dictatorship and the independent Republic of Haiti, founded on a policy of white genocide. The secretary of the new Haitian dictator would state, "For our Declaration of Independence, we should have the skin of a white man for parchment, his skull for an inkwell, his blood for ink, and a bayonet for a pen." What followed was the brutal extermination of nearly all of the 5,000 remaining whites, carried out under the orders of the Haitian government. With the Europeans removed, Haiti would quickly revert from the world's wealthiest colony to the conditions that can be observed wherever Africans are left in charge, and is now consistently ranked among the 30 poorest countries globally, while also having the 4th highest crime rate in the world. The average IQ of the Haitian population is 67, with IQs 75 and lower, qualifying as a mental disability under the U.S. Social Security Administration, meaning that the majority of Haitians qualify as mentally disabled by U.S. standards. After a massive earthquake devastated Haiti in January of 2010, the Obama administration would grant all Haitian immigrants temporary protected status, a legal status preventing the deportation of the 100,000 Haitians believed to be living in the United States illegally, as well as 30,000 who were already in the process of being deported, and instead giving them documentation allowing them to live and work in the United States for up to 18 months without the threat of deportation. But it would soon become apparent that this temporary protected status wasn't going to be so temporary after all.
I am here to announced that the administration is extending the registration period for individuals interested in applying for or qualified for TPS, our TPS program. We are extending it for 6 months into January of
Because the situation in Haiti was disastrous even before the earthquake, the Obama administration could continue to argue that conditions in Haiti justified the extension of TPS for Haitians past the initial 18 months. And through a series of extensions and renewals, Haiti's temporary protected status has remained in place for over 14 years, from 2010 to 2024, during which time hundreds of thousands of Haitians made their way into the U.S., many settling in Miami's Little Haiti neighborhood, where in 2016 they would find a new champion.
The Haitian people deserve better, so I intend to give them. I will give them better. And whether you vote for me or you don't vote for me, I really want to be your greatest champion, and I will be your champion, whether you vote for me or not.
To all our friends in Little Haiti, they're great people. I mean, I spent a long time. These are people that are incredible. They have the warmest feeling, the warmest heart. But to all of our friends in Little Haiti, your day of justice is coming, believe me.
Upon taking office, Trump's administration would grant a 6-month extension to Haitian TPS, after being urged to do so by a bipartisan congressional group, including Jewish Congress members Chuck Schumer, Dianne Feinstein, Al Franken, Ileana Ros-Lehtinen, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, and Lois Frankel, as well as Republican Senator Marco Rubio and Sherrod Brown, a Democratic senator representing Ohio. But in November of 2017, the Trump administration's decision to end TPS for Haitians, on the grounds that conditions in Haiti had sufficiently improved since the earthquake in 2010, would draw outrage from the Congress members. And Marco Rubio, currently set to oversee refugee resettlement as Secretary of State in Trump's second term, would pen an open letter of protest urging the Trump administration to extend Haitian TPS, warning that Haitians forced to return to Haiti would face dire conditions, including lack of housing, inadequate health services, and low prospects for employment. The presence of Haitian immigrants in the U.S. would soon create all of these conditions for white Americans in Springfield, Ohio, who, unlike illegal immigrants from Haiti and genocidal Jews in Israel, don't have advocates in the U.S. Congress. The lobbying power of the business interests who benefit from cheap Haitian labor proved to be more powerful than the U.S. president, and the attempt to end Haitian TPS was stalled by multiple legal challenges on the grounds of racism, and was ultimately overturned by the incoming Biden administration in 2021. But while the fate of Haitian immigration into the U.S. was up in the air, the state of Ohio was becoming more welcoming to Haitian immigrants than ever before. In January of 2019, Republican Mike DeWine was sworn in as governor of Ohio. In 1998, DeWine funded the creation of the Becky DeWine School, a network of free schools across Haiti, where he has been a frequent visitor ever since. And it was in the first year of DeWine's term that the first Haitians began to arrive in Springfield, Ohio.
If you haven't visited downtown Springfield recently, you may not recognize it. Our downtown is truly in the midst of a renaissance. Retail is returning, restaurants are opening, events are happening, and infrastructure is being built. Here are just a few of the highlights.
In 2019, the Springfield Chamber of Commerce, representing the combined lobbying power of the city's major business interests, had seen major success in using its immigrant-focused approach to stimulate new business activity in the area. And as the new businesses were getting established in Springfield, it was now time for the Chamber of Commerce, which rebranded itself as the Greater Springfield Partnership in 2021, to deliver a cheap immigrant labor force. As the Chamber's Director of Workforce Development, Amy Donahoe, would later say of the Chamber's plan to flood Springfield with Haitian immigrants, "We needed a workforce."
That there was businesses that knew that this was a trend that was going to happen based on federal government regulation. And there was a pipeline of working that needed to be filled in the state of Ohio and other states where there were companies asking for jobs. Because of that, there are companies that knew they were going to make an effort to bring individuals who are crossing the border based on federal regulations that they could do that.
The Greater Springfield Partnership and its staffing arm headed by George Tenn, seen here in a promotional video for the partnership, would then initiate a new immigrant-focused staffing policy for Springfield's businesses. Mike McDorman, president and CEO of the Greater Springfield Partnership, would form a business arrangement with George Tenn and his staffing company, First Diversity Staffing, in April of 2019. 2 months later, the employees of First Diversity Staffing were ordered to stop hiring locals and focus on recruiting Haitian migrants, who the business would then begin to transport from Florida in unmarked white vans. First Diversity Staffing and the business interests of the Greater Springfield Partnership would later publicly justify this policy by portraying local American workers as unreliable, worthless drug addicts who refuse to go to work.
Jamie McGregor is the CEO of McGregor Metal, which makes welded parts for the auto and farm industries. Right now, about 10% of his workforce is Haitian, over 30 employees.
I wish I had 30 more. Our Haitian associates come to work every day. They don't have a drug problem. They'll stay at their machine. They'll achieve their numbers. They are here to work. And so in general, that's a stark difference from what we're used to in our community.
Is it more likely that this was the real reason businesses began to exclusively hire Haitian migrants? Or that it was an after-the-fact justification of an immigrant-focused policy that had already been established in 2014?
The argument is that they're filling jobs that Clark County residents could not or would not want to fill, but I'm hearing that that's not necessarily the case.
Well, they're not advertising to the local population, so there's preferential treatment through that First Diversity Staffing to provide the opportunity for work to the temporary protection status immigrants that are coming in. So that's setting up a clash, with the locals here, because they feel like they're not getting the opportunity to even apply for those jobs because they're not seeing the jobs advertised to the local community, and they would like to take those jobs if they could get them, but they feel like they're being slighted by the staffing services and the corporations that are here.
But let's assume that the opioid crisis that had devastated Springfield and other cities across Ohio had also negatively affected the local labor force. Surely this couldn't be chalked up to some Jewish conspiracy to get white people addicted to drugs. Right? In the 1990s, the Jewish Sackler family, owners of the pharmaceutical giant Purdue Pharma, would deliberately engineer an opioid addiction epidemic using their product OxyContin in order to rake in massive profits from the suffering of their victims. The company would go so far as to direct doctors as to which types of vulnerable patients to target, and the Jewish executives had a specific demographic in mind. At the OxyContin launch party in 1996, Richard Sackler would brag, "The launch of OxyContin tablets will be followed by a blizzard of prescriptions that will bury the competition. The prescription blizzard will be so deep, dense, and white." Since 1999, over 1.3 million Americans have died from drug overdoses, twice the number of Americans that have died in battle in every war in American history, with the overwhelming majority of those deaths caused by opioids. And while they were intentionally wreaking death and destruction on America's white population, the Jewish executives at Purdue Pharma were privately laughing about their efforts to addict and kill more Americans, while also carrying out a strategy of publicly blaming their victims. Richard Sackler would state in a private email, "We have to hammer on the abusers in every way possible. They are the culprits and the problem. They are reckless criminals. Likewise, the business interests in Springfield, Ohio, could use the shadow of the opioid crisis to publicly justify discriminating against white American workers in favor of cheap, illegal immigrants from Haiti. And First Diversity Staffing would continue to bus in an army of Haitian migrants to replace American workers, illegally cramming them into crumbling and dilapidated single-family homes that were being quickly bought up by George X, who would charge the Haitians not by unit or even by room, but by bed, charging each Haitian hundreds of dollars per bed in rooms shared with up to 10 or more other tenants. First Diversity would soon be joined in these practices by other landlords in the area, such as local property manager Garland Properties LLC and a nationwide real estate empire run out of Brooklyn's Hasidic Jewish community by Mendel Steiner, who committed suicide in January of 2025. Before long, housing costs in Springfield were skyrocketing as overcharged units were being filled with Haitian migrants, leading to a major housing shortage and homelessness crisis for Springfield's American population. As early as 2019, concerns about human trafficking by First Diversity Staffing were raised to local leaders such as Chamber of Commerce President Mike McDorman and Springfield City Manager Brian Heck, neither of whom seemed to be concerned at all by the situation. In 2021, Joe Biden would take office as the 46th President of the United States, bringing with him what mainstream Jewish publications were proudly proclaiming to be the most Jewish administration in American history. Within his first months in office, President Biden would travel to Cleveland, Ohio, to announce his economic policy of a tight labor market designed to raise wages and benefits for American workers.
When it comes to the economy we're building, rising wages aren't a bug, they're a feature. We want to get something economists call full employment. Instead of workers competing with each other for jobs that are scarce, we want employers to compete with each other to attract work. We want the companies to compete to attract workers.
But while the president was announcing a policy of full employment for American labor, his Jewish cabinet was carrying out exactly the opposite. Under the Department of Homeland Security of Jewish immigration extremist Alejandro Mayorkas, the U.S. borders were thrown wide open for the largest waves of mass immigration in American history. The Trump administration's challenges to Haitian temporary protected status were overturned, and the amount of third world immigrants eligible for TPS was tripled from 400,000 in January of 2021 to 1.2 million in March of 2024. 3 months later, Mayorkas would extend TPS to another 309,000 Haitian migrants who entered the country illegally, on top of 154,000 more Haitians that were brought into the country under a separate program called humanitarian parole, all of whom are eligible to receive government financial aid not available to American citizens, along with being prioritized for food stamps and Medicare, all while taking jobs from low-income American workers. In 2021, Alejandra Castillo, a founding member of the American Jewish Committee's Latino Jewish Leadership Council, was appointed as head of the Economic Development Administration, just in time for the agency to award $1 billion in Build Back Better grants to the local governments and regional economic planners most willing to comply with federal policy goals. And under Castillo's EDA, equity was made priority number one when it came to the agency's investment priorities. With the EDA's aggressive shift to a more equitable approach, it was time for the EDA and the economic planners of the Dayton region to sit down and create a new comprehensive economic development strategy to replace the one approved in 2012. The resulting 2022 Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy for the Dayton region, the authors of which included Horton Hobbs of the Greater Springfield Partnership, reflected that the region's greatest need was the influx of a workforce that would reflect the federal priorities of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and the plan would lay out a very robust workforce development strategy for the region. These workforce concerns were also shared by certain special interests in the state. At the 2021 annual meeting of the Ohio Jewish Communities, the theme of which was Supercharging Israel-Ohio Partnerships, the future of Ohio's workforce was a major topic of discussion, featuring a panel including representatives of the state government and the president of the Ohio Chamber of Commerce. If Ohio was to properly serve the interests of Israel, the state would need more workers, and the Ohio Chamber of Commerce would openly lobby for the state of Ohio to pursue a policy of immigrant-focused economic development to grow the economy in spite of population decline. In the fall of 2021, the city government of Springfield, Ohio, would draw up its annual action plan for 2022, designed to ensure the maximum amount of funding from the federal government and to guide how the federal funds are allocated. Included in the Springfield government's official plan for the area of employment was First Diversity Staffing. First Diversity Staffing and the business interests of the Greater Springfield Partnership were getting a green light at the federal, state, and local levels for their policy of displacing and impoverishing Springfield's white American population through the mass importation of Haitians. And in the summer of 2021, First Diversity Staffing, soon joined by other staffing companies in town, would accelerate the relocation of Haitians to Springfield full throttle. By 2024, between 15 and 20,000 Haitians had been dumped on the city of 60,000 people. Once the arrival of Haitians could no longer be ignored, how faithfully would the city government follow the immigrant welcoming policies that were committed to in 2014? And what would happen to the citizens of Springfield?